Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and we're back with another Forbidden Light deck. This time it's going to be using the new Malamar, definitely one of the most anticipated cards from the latest set. However, not going to be using the Ultra Necrozma. In fact, it's going to be a different build entirely, utilizing the old Necrozma GX as well as Wobbuffet, one of my personal favourite cards that I've always tried to build around, and I'll try and discuss why in this video. So, let's start off with the basic stuff. That is going to be that Malamar is a great energy accelerator, Bronzong saw play, even in a field of item locking variants. Eels saw a bunch of play, even though there was a load of Landorus variants. Malamar will definitely see play. I mean, it feels a lot less vulnerable than Eels were, because your Inkays have much more hit points and they're not as easily dealt with. And there's no relevant item lock right now. That's something that Bronzong always suffered with. Although there is ability lock, we have Field Blower. So it feels like this is ready to go and is just an amazing form of energy acceleration in the format. From there, why are we using this instead of the Ultra Necrozma build? Well, Necrozma, the normal one, his GX attack is bonkers. If you can hit 2 or 3 targets, the value is insane. And that really does help set up knockouts for Wobbuffet quite perfectly with a Psychic Assault attack. And the reason we want to do this is because it's a non-GX in the active that also locks out the opponent. When we get to the mid to late game, after your opponent's dealt with, one of your Necrozmas, maybe even 2 Necrozmas, you can go Wobbuffet, you can hit him with an N. Ability lock on top of that denies Zoroark's trading, denies Octillery getting people back up to big hands, even Oranguru, and it can really just stomp out the opponent's options for trying to finish off the game with, a Guzma plus energy attachment or whatever it may be. Wobbuffet makes it more difficult, and that's the bottom line. It's a great combination, and I think it can be potentially very powerful. Bear in mind, Necrozma GX, he's no slouch himself. He can still be, just like the Ultra Necrozma, a one-hit KO machine. I think they're comparable in power level, and that's why we're trying to make this build happen, because you can utilize Wobbuffet in addition to everything else. And Wobbuffet gives you, early game defense against Zoroark builds. How often do you see Zoroark go crazy after a turn 1 Brigette going first? Then they get into their Zoroarks and start trading away, getting value on you. They're Guzmaing up your most important attacker on the bench. They're starting to get damage on the most important things, or even taking prizes. If you just lead a Wob, then their plans are halted, basically, and it gives you a much better win rate than potentially the other Necrozma build in that matchup, and that's something that we are definitely going to keep an eye on. And the fact is, you're an all-psychic list as well, so you're probably going to have a better win rate against Buzzwole, so having a better win rate, or a better defense against Zoroark trading all the time, and a better win rate against Buzzwole, try and add those 2 things up. This is probably going to be a great build of Malamar, in my opinion. The final thing to note, it's a little slight inclusion that I thought was worth mentioning. Because we're just playing all basic Psychic Energy, means we're going to whiff less attacks. The Ultra Necrozma build needs to play some Metal Energies. Normally it's a low count, like 3 or 4 copies. And if you just happen to Sycamore and whiff on a certain turn, it means you're doing nothing. Whereas in this build, you're pretty much always going to be attacking. The Wobbuffet's only attack for 2 Psychic Energy as well, so once you've done a Necrozma's GX attack, the energy stays on the board there. The energy stays on the board for the Wobbuffet, so if they're Guzmaing around Wob, dealing with the Malamars, you don't care as much as potentially the other Ultra Necrozma build, because they're always burning energy, getting them off themselves each turn. This list can be a lot more defensive and retain its energy on its attackers, so I think it's definitely a different way to play the deck, and one that I think is pretty cool, and the one that I think is actually best in my personal opinion. So, let's look at the Pokemon we're going to be playing. 18 in total, a thick line of the Malamar, 4/4 copies of the Inkay and the Malamar. Quick note on the Inkay, it has 60 hit points and it can send the opponent to sleep as the attack. I didn't bother translating it for you, but that's what it can do. The Malamar, 90 hit points with that Psychic Recharge. I've already mentioned it. Once during a turn before you attack, you may attach a Psychic Energy from your discard to one of your benched Pokemon. We're going to try and stack these, get multiple on the board, so that we can power up these dudes that you can see on the top line there. The old Necrozma GX, one of my favourite cards since its release. I've always tried to build around this guy because I think he's so strong. The Light Send ability means that he can't be damaged by colourless Pokemon. Not very relevant, really. But it does also have the Prismatic Burst attack. This is one that's almost been forgotten by a bunch of people. It does 10 base damage, and you discard all Psychic from this Pokemon, and it does 60 damage for each energy you discarded. So for the 3 requisite cost for 3 Psych Energy, you're doing 190 or 220 with a Choice Band. Bear in mind, you don't actually one-hit KO Zoroarks because of resistance. That is something that is worth noting for certain. But pretty much everything else, you can get one-hit KOs for the 3 energy cost, and if you go for an extra Psych Energy on top of that, which you're allowed to discard, you then get to one-hit KO everything you want. So, just like Ultra Necrozma, it's unlimited damage output in theory, depending on how much energy you can discard. So, a really, really good beat stick that, again, is accompanied by a great GX attack in Black Ray. You do 100 to each of your opponent's GX Pokemon. That's just insane. GX and DX, I should say. Oh no, wait, is it just GX? I can't read it at this size. I think it might just be GX. But that's still fine, because we're in a format of just GXs, pretty much. And really, it's the instance where, if you can't one-hit KO something, for example, a Zoroark list, why not just put 100 onto everything, then you can one-hit KO them from then on. Even with Wobbuffets, you can get one-hit KOs, provided that you have a Choice Band. So, that's absolutely fine. Black Ray, an amazing, amazing GX attack. It sets up this Wobbuffet line of play, which is really cool. And in general, it just puts things into a much easier range so that you don't have to churn out the Prismatic Burst turn after turn. For example, if you're up against ability-locking decks, you can put things back in your level much easier. So it's just a really nice GX attack that I think is very, very valuable. For example, even if you just if you miss a Guzma on a certain turn, you can still, put 200 damage on the board with a Black Ray and just ignore the opponent's active and give them an issue, force them to find a Floatstone. It's just a really good GX attack that we're trying to build around in this list. From there, just 2 copies of Wobbuffet. I know I've called it a Wobbuffet Malamar list, but he is more of a late-game centric attacker because you've used your Black Ray. He's what you'll then go into and start throwing into the opponent's active. Each turn, just 2 energy costs, so even if you just have 1 Malamar remaining on your board and you can manually attach, you can carry on spamming these hits, and it's going to be a great way to finish off the opponent. It shuts off so many potent abilities right now. Think about the Vikabulus of the world, the Zoroarks, the Octilleries, the Lycanrocs, all sorts right now. Oranguru. It's just going to be really, really difficult for people to deal with because he's just such a pain. And one of my favourite cards still ever printed, to be honest. I try and make him work whenever possible, and it may just do it this time. I'm excited for this archetype, I'm not going to lie. And then we're also going to be playing 2 Fates Collide Mews. It has free retreat for one thing, which is great for you because it gives you great pivoting options when you're using this Malamar charging up the bench. You can simply move out of this Mew and into a new attacker, which is great for you. It also comes with the encounter attack, which improves your consistency in the early game as well. If you happen to lead Mew, you can use the encounter attack after doing something like a Brigette, for example, and you can get yourself into another Lele, and that gets you back into a supporter to keep you going, or you just encounter, go ahead, grab yourself that Malamar, get as many going as possible to start getting these big attacks off. And bear in mind, Mew, of course, can be copying Necrozma GX, and that's going to be great for you as well. More non-GX Psychic types swinging away. We know it's going to be a huge threat for the likes of Buzzwole, the likes of Espeon, the likes of Naganadel GX. These are all Psychic weak. Mew is going to get great value in this list for multiple reasons. From there, a couple of copies of Lele. I feel like we don't need more than 2 because we have such amazing ball search to find the Lele now. We have 4 copies of Ultra Ball and Mysterious Treasure, so we have plenty of outs to hit our Lele in the opening turns. And we also have 1 Dawnwings Necrozma GX. We should bear in mind that Moon's Eclipse is actually a GX attack that we can use. 180 is a very good number, but in general, it's in here for the invasion ability so that we can, once again, jump into the active so we can charge up our main attacker on the bench, and then the Dawnwing simply retreats out and you can go in and start swinging. So it acts as an attacker in certain matchups, and it provides a great ability for you. Really, really solid single card that you can play in the list. So onto the items, once again, very, very simple stuff. 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher, going to try and recycle the most important Pokemon that we need at the time, be it a Mew, if we're against the Buzzwole list, be it a Wobbuffet, if it's late game, or just making sure we have multiple Malamars on the board. Very simple stuff, really. And then you can see the 8 Ball Search cards that we have. Mysterious Treasure, amazing, amazing new card from this Forbidden Light set. And it searches every single target in the list. As you saw, the last slide, all 18 of our Pokemon, they're Psychic types, so there's nothing this card can't find. Gives us amazing outs for Lele, getting us into multiple Malamar as well is just phenomenal. So it's extra discard as well for more Psych Energies getting into the bin very easily. and it's just all around phenomenal. Having this much search in a deck like this makes you really motor through. You can thin as much as possible, even though we are playing extra copies of certain cards. You know, the thick Malamar line, 3 Necrozma GX. You may not ever need to attack with 3 in a game, but you can Ultra Ball them away, you can Mysterious Treasure them away, you can really thin out your deck as much as possible. And that's something really important to note, because we're not actually playing our own copies of Artillery or Guru, so we really are reliant on these 8 Ball Search cards to thin the jank. Whatever we don't want to insta-play, we can start thinning with these 8 cards, and that's a really, really potent weapon in this deck's arsenal on top of everything else. 3 copies of Field Blower, not playing any of our own stadiums. I guess you could consider Altar of the Moon, but I don't think we really need it. Instead, just Field Blower because it can, you know, remove things like Parallel City, which would be a headache for this list. Additionally, you can get rid of Tools from Garbodor, of course. We are an ability-focused list, trying to spam Malamar as much as possible, and the Field Blower does that for us, so 3 copies, I believe, is plenty. Only 2 copies of Choice Band right now. I think because we have 2 real lines of play, we can go 1-hit KO-centric with the Necrozma GX, but we also have the Black Ray option, and if you Black Ray, you can 1-hit KO, or sorry, you can then finish things off with Wobbuffet quite comfortably without the need for Choice Band. The main reason Choice Band's actually in here is to help out against Zoroarks, so that you can hit them a little bit easier with your Necrozma, or just with the Wobbuffet as well, finishing them off. So I think Choice Band isn't necessary in a very high count unless you're expecting a lot of Zoroark, but even then, there'll be a tech that I talk about later which may be worth the slot over a 3rd Choice Band. So right now it's a nice math fixer, but not absolutely mandatory in my eyes. You could actually cut this even further, but I think we have the space for 2, and it'll just crop up at certain times and be useful. From there, 3 copies of Floatstone. I think it's plenty for the maneuverability. Alongside the 2 Mews that we have, I think it's absolutely fine overall. From there, the supporter line is very simplistic. 1 copy of Brigette. Even though we are playing 8 Ball Search cards, I can't stress enough how important it is to get that early Brigette on board. Get yourself Inkay, and the attacker that you want, or even 3 Inkays if you already have the ones that you need. And that thins the deck for you and means that your Ball Search cards are going into exactly what you want, and that is the Malamars, because getting as many of them on turn 2 as possible is going to be the key to going aggressively and starting to pressurize the board, either with a Black Ray or with 1-hit KOs. So yeah, Brigette's still a phenomenal card. I feel like you get away with just 1 copy because you can fall back on the fact that we have so much Ball Search anyway, that if it's prize, it's not the end of the world, but I think it's, again, too good to cut altogether. 3 copies of N and Cynthia. Fairly high counts of these because, again, I've mentioned we don't play Guru or Octillery, so it's important to have these even when reaching the late game. There's even a debate to cutting another N for a 4th Cynthia just for more power draw, or finding a space for a 4th Cynthia. I, again, can't really question that too much. I think it could be a decent play. If you find Choice Band not doing enough for you, you can definitely make the space for the 4th Cynthia. I'll again mention a tech option that I'm sort of debating in this list that we could be considering for sure, instead of Choice Bands altogether, so do bear that in mind and stick around. But overall, simple lines of these. 3 copies of Guzma as well. I think because you have Black Ray to set things up, there's not going to be something that you can't deal with more often than not, so I think I'm fairly content with just 3 copies, but again, it could be one that you push a little bit further if need be. It also gives you good maneuverability in terms of switching, so you can Malamar up and stuff like that, going into a Mew or a Dawn Wings or whatever has a Floatstone quite easily. And then 4 copies of Sycamore. Power draw, gets energy into the discard, which is great for you. And yeah, as I said, you want to be hitting everything as quickly as possible, and Sycamore's just great for that. Rounding it off with 11 Psychic Energy. I think it's plenty. Again, if you're really working for a space, you can go down to 10, I think, relatively comfortably. With the amount of discard that we have, it's pretty fine. But bear in mind, manual attachments is still an important factor for this deck. If the opponent is targeting the Malamar part of the deck, maybe if you've had a slower start, for example, they can start to chug away your Malamars. So having manual attachments is still going to be important. You can thin and thin and thin, but also, again, you know, it's like you've had an extra Malamar on the board the whole time if you can just have manual attachments on top of the energy that you can recover. So I think 11 is absolutely plenty. You'll see them very, very often. You'll be bidding them and comfortably have manual attachments on top. So overall, I think it's a comfortable count. It can be cut down if you really need it to make space for techs if you find yourself having an awkward matchup against something. But overall, I think it's safe and secure right now. As always, I'd like to give a good, simple baseline for you guys to test out and then tweak to your own preferences. So here is a copy of the full list. You can pause it now if you wish and write things down or whatever and get net decking and testing for this archetype, because it's one that I'm very excited to do a little bit more testing with myself. Onto the tech options, there's not too many here. I've already mentioned maybe tinkering around with the choice band count. I think that's definitely valid. I think Espeon EX is the one that I'm really considering more than anything else, because we are playing that Black Ray, or we have the Black Ray GX attack available to us. If there are a lot of Zoroark variants continuing to perform, this can definitely improve your win rate. We're already playing Wobbuffets to help out against Zoroark, but instead of choice bands, potentially this is an option for you, because you can, deal with, if they've got 3 Zoroark in play all at once, you can then have a 3-prize turn the following turn by going for a Miraculous Shine. It means that they may have to parallel their own side of the board, and that's a win-win for you because it hurts their own damage output, their own draw engine, and it means that you're not getting hurt with Parallel City as well. So I think Espeon EX is definitely something I want to experiment with. Right now it's not in the list, but I can definitely see it having great synergy with Black Ray. We've seen it somewhat before with some other Black Ray variants, like in Expanded, as a great option, and I think it could once again come in. Another note actually is something like an Oricorio. Again, just synergy with Black Ray. I didn't actually put it in the slide, but it's one thinking about it now that you could again consider. It's just another non-EX, non-GX psychic Pokemon that you can tech into the list. Quite easy to synergize with a Black Ray, so you could have multiple prize turns, and it's something that could be pretty cool. The final tech option is something like Guru. Even though we are playing Wobbs, because we have Dawn Wings that can still burst in, you can still get draws from Instruct. I think the main reason I'm not playing this right now is actually bench space among anything else, because it is tight and there won't be many options for you to use this Instruct to great effect. So that's why he's not in the list. But if you're really concerned about getting N to a low hand size and having nothing to do, just fingers crossed that you hit like your Guzma for game or whatever, you can increase the Guru count, but that is going to be all ready for the techs. In terms of matchups, I think it's actually pretty good, to be honest. I think right now the Zoro matchup is kind of okay, depending on when and where you hit your Wobbuffets and how effective the Black Ray GX attack is. It can, of course, be played around to a certain extent. They can use things like Ace of Rollers to negate damage. They can use Parallel Cities, as I've already mentioned. But in general, they will have a lot of targets that you can use with Black Ray. Sometimes you're doing 300-400 damage in one attack. And that does set up, even if it's just 2 Zoroarks being set up for Wobbuffet KOs, I think that's a big swing for you. Because alongside N, that could be a lot of turns of them drawing potentially nothing, especially if you're dealing with their attacker at the time as well. So I think that's definitely valid. I think Zorogarb would be the hardest one, because it's combining the fact that they have resist and they're stopping you draw on certain turns. They're stopping you get your Malamars chained very nicely. So I think that's the hard matchup. I think Zoroark in general could be a little bit tricky, but if we do find that to be the case, I would definitely test out the Espeon EX, and I think your win rate would increase. I think Greninja is one of the hardest matchups, because you'd have to spam Necrozma's regular attack unless they get unlucky and have to put down GXs for Black Ray. So I think Greninja is going to be hard. Obviously, they can Shadow Stitch. Even if you have Wob and you're active, you're not going to be doing too much damage. So their Shurikens probably will make it through and be a difficult matchup for you. And finally, Xerneas Break, I think they'll just be able to ramp quite quickly because we're a little bit slow in the early turns. And again, the Black Ray isn't going to have a huge impact, so the Wobbuffets basically become useless. So that's something to note. You really do prefer to be dealing with GX variants than non-GX ones, and I think that's just the case with these Malamar builds. Even though we are fairly non-GXy on our own end, I think other builds can keep up with you a little bit more sometimes, and they can Guzma up the GXs that we inevitably have to play because Mew has to copy them. So yeah. So here are my closing thoughts on the list. I'm a big fan. I think Necrozma GX, one of my favourite cards printed from this era, really. And it's a GX attack worth building around. We've seen how good it can be and expanded alongside like Dimension Valley, Garbodor box lists a little bit earlier in that format. But still, nonetheless, it was built around. It has been very potent. And it just gets great value and has amazing synergy with the Wobbuffet. That's why I want to make this work. Simply being a Psychic type, non-GX focused deck, you know, a Buzzwole variant, a heavy Buzzwole variant, it's going to find it very difficult to get through like 3 Fates Collide Mews. That's just a fact. Like, it's going to be a favourable matchup for you, even if your Malamars aren't sticking on the board. I think it's going to be quite easy for you to win that game, in all honesty. And the fact that Wobbuffet is just so powerful right now, so many decks require a combination of cards to round out games, and they normally need something like Octillery, Guru, or Zoro to help get them there. The fact that you can deny that and have the board state basically 1, because the following turn you can then just go Malamar, 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 blow something up with Necrozma, just is going to be so cool for you to finish off games. I think it's just going to be a very potent and difficult strategy for people to play around, and that's why I'm excited for this archetype. As I said, there's a few cards here and there that we can try tinkering around with, but overall I feel this has legs alongside the new Ultra Necrozma list, and I think potentially even more so just in the meta that we're at, being able to capitalize on Mew, capitalize on Wobbuffet as well. 2 very powerful Psychic-based cards that is just good for the meta right now. So that's what I'm thinking for the Malamar build. Jack will be bringing you the Ultra Necrozma list, seeing as though he is a Rails fanboy of old. So I'll let him get on with that one. But I hope I've sold my build to you, and hopefully it's one that you guys can test now, because I feel this hasn't got as much attention as perhaps the new Ultra Necrozma build. Maybe just because they've all been packaged in the same set that it's just blatantly obvious that people want you to play that build. But I think this one definitely has legs. So let me know down below about this archetype. What have you been building with Malamar? Will this one see play? Were you thinking about Wobbuffet? Is it me living the pipe dream? Always fingers crossed for Wob. And please leave a like to the video if you did. Subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know what decks you want us to see. You want to see next. Again, we've got a load written down, but if there's any other archetypes out there, we'll be happy to profile them. So, yeah, see you guys in another video. Cheers.